Skyping in with all of the global movements and more. It's Peter McGuire, CEO of XM Australia. Peter, it's great to have you with us. Obviously, the ECB and the EU leaders, true to form, have a lot of work on their hands. If we see the Eurozone GDP shrink, I suppose, is it up to the ECB to have a whatever it takes moment? Are they likely to go that road?
Well, good afternoon, Nadine. Yes, I think they will, but if we look at numbers, you're looking at around about 3.5% as far as a GDP shrink. So that's what the forecasted number is. Remembering that China, if you roll your mind back to that one, that was down 10%, but naturally the pandemic started a lot earlier through that phase. So that gives us some sort of an idea of the severity of the measure and how Lagarde has to work through this and keep it all together. Now, it's not going to be an easy task. We've got the North and the South as far as the countries of Europe, but not singing from the same hymn book. So that creates a set of uncertainty, and I feel as though that moving forward, it's going to be a hard action. You've got Sweden's mindset, and you've got something happening in Italy and Spain, as we know. So the two poles are certainly very much apart.
Well, we will hear more likely about the Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program, the PEPP. I guess an acronym you and I never would have thought that we would be referencing. So we'll be on watch, I suppose, for the ECB to ramp up asset purchases. More immediate, we will be hearing from the US Fed. What are we expecting? The likely sort of scenario is no action coming from the FOMC. So all focus really will be on Jay Powell's media conference that's held after.
Well, exactly right. That's about a half an hour later to an hour later after the meeting tomorrow night in Sydney time. Now, it's going to be interesting how that plays out. Naturally, the Fed has thrown everything, and including the kitchen sink at this. Junk bond purchases, you name it, they have done it to stimulate as much as possible. Probably in a lot of ways, Nadine, Europe could take a little bit of a look at that and really, get an appreciation, the size and the severity of what the Fed's done to really create I think just a changing mindset from a central bank perspective. So it's going to be a very, very strong, hard push. I think it'll be interesting what Powell comes out with his rhetoric and so on. But I feel as though in a lot of ways they're prepared to do whatever is needed to get a result and to get that economy back on track. It's going to be interesting also, Texas and Georgia back open to a slow reopening, but what impact that has to Powell's mindset as far as, where the economy moves forward.
Interesting. Texas opening up, obviously a big oil state. They've got a lot riding on getting people back to work. But then the question becomes, where does the demand come from for the oil that those producers are still pumping? Peter, let's talk oil then. It's been a wild ride. The energy names here in Australia are having a great session. We saw oil, mixed really through the overnight period, but watching it rise in the early Asian session. Is my guess as good as yours as to where it goes and what happens next?
I feel as though there's possibly a push for the next matter of a day or so, Nadine. I feel as though it's in an upward draft. And when you've got a market that's moved as heavily as it has over the last matter of weeks, it's hard to put a forecast to say, if it goes up $1 or up $2, then we're breaking out. But I feel as though that there's, at the moment, a push to the upside. Before that bad news is released, I think it's coincidental that you've got what'll happen with the ECB and the Fed and then Jerome's Powell's. And then, of course, Friday night with the non-farm payrolls with the best part of 20+ million, 26 million to Americans having filed unemployment benefits. So that gives us some sort of an idea from a demand destruction perspective. I noticed that Saudi Arabia have come out with a $9 billion loss as far as their economy for budget. So they've got all sorts of problems with all the producers also. So it's a tough, hard time at the moment.
Oh boy, it certainly is. Just back to the FOMC. So if we do hear the US Fed talking more stimulus, do you think that could be a negative for the US dollar?
I feel as though in some ways, yes. I wouldn't be surprised it's been range bound against that euro if you're looking at the US dollar index from that 98 and a half to about 102, Nadine. So I think that you'll see a little bit of softness there back towards that 98. Depends on the rhetoric, depends on what Powell's mood is, and depends on naturally how severe leading into that Friday night non-farm payroll. Is there a surprise number that's greater than what we anticipate? And I think until you actually get that number on the print, then there could be some softness for that dollar in the short term.
Well, let's talk the Aussie dollar. Wow, what a pop that we've seen. I mean, we saw a pop after the inflation read that came in better than expected today, but even prior to that, one of the best performing currencies, up around 6-7 week highs. Where is all this strength coming from? But importantly, can it last?
Well, I think naturally it's a bit of a proxy for the old Chinese economy. So there's the first part there, Nadine. The second part is that it really did pop and it moved very strongly over the last 2 weeks. A big move to the upside. It was the best performing currency out there last week. Traders are loving that upward trend. Where it goes, I think a lot of the profit has been taken in it, or taken out of it in the sense of trading. They've done very, very well. You might see a little bit of sideways movement from here. May give up 1 or 2% of those little gains, but I think overall you could see a little bit more move later in this month. Later in May regarding the Aussie.
Almost in May, hard to believe. NAB has a year-end target of 70 US cents. I'm not going to get you to play that game, but does that sound reasonable? I suppose that would be predicated on a strong Chinese economy or an emergent Chinese economy, and the global economy getting back on track as it slowly opens up.
Well, exactly. You've got 8 months to run. I mean, there's every chance what happens in those 8 months, there's so many moving parts that need to actually be put into the melting pot. You could be at 70 cents by, going as early as August or September if you see a big turnaround and, the lockdowns aren't as severe and we don't get any second wave pandemics. And I think that's the great frightener from everyone, from, parents are concerned as far as children going back to school. What impact are we at the end of this, or is there going to be another wave? So there's so many components. I think the Aussie will trend higher, and I wouldn't be surprised. 70 seems a fairly achievable sort of number.
Well, we will see. We've just got breaking news out that Australia's Deputy Chief Medical Officer says a countdown to lifting some social restrictions is on. Maybe we'll be able to see each other in person soon, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us today. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nadine. I hope we can.
Peter McGuire from XM. You too.